Hi everyone, welcome to Thursdays at 11 with You Can't Yell at the Deaf Girl. Hi, I'm Wendy, and thank you for joining us today. Normally we do this every Thursday morning at 11 o'clock, but we've had a few technical difficulties today, so we're a little later than normal. So I apologize for that, but thanks for joining us today. We're still on Thursday, so we're having a Thursday topic instead. What I wanted to do really quick is remind you guys to hit the subscribe button and also hit the like button. Let YouTube people, the algorithms, know that you think that this video and this channel have some value to your world, and I know it has some to mine, and your support would be so appreciated. So today we're going to talk a little bit about microaggression, which is really a fancy way of saying, oh my God, did you really just say that? And oftentimes we say stuff that we don't realize is kind of just not cool. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today and what exactly microaggression is and why it matters. It's a big deal, really. So let's dive right in to the conversation. So microaggression is really a term used for brief and commonplace daily verbal, behavioral, and environmental indignities that communicate hostility, they're kind of derogatory, or they're negative in their prejudicial slights and insults towards another group. And often these groups are marginalized groups in society. Think people of color, think people with disabilities, think older people, think people who definitely don't have a say in common society norms. This term was first coined in 1970 by a professor at Harvard University who was observing some unique behavior by white students toward the black students on campus. And he noticed that some of the comments and the behaviors and the environment that were created were not overly nice. So he penned that term. Fast forward to today's society, it's been expanded in a great way. Not in a great way, so to speak, but maybe expanded to include people with disabilities, people, older people, women, minorities, and of course, it still has the inclusion of people with color. People of color, my apologies. The one thing about microaggression is that it becomes a thing in our daily conversations or the situations that we're in, whether it's work, home, or social setting. And oftentimes, when you get a reaction of, did you just say that? Or did you just do that? You've committed a microaggression. So let's talk about that a little bit more. I know I'm guilty of it. I can be pretty abrasive, pretty brash. I think I'm joking. But looking back on some of my behaviors, I'm just thinking, well, the people are still talking to me because holy crap, some of the stuff I've said in my lifetime, whoo, but you know what? There's kind of a background to that, and I'm loving that I'm learning about this right now because it's giving me an opportunity to deep dive into my own biases and prejudices. And we all have them. Even with someone with a disability, I have biases and I have prejudices. I'm a mother of an autistic child. I'm a mother of a child who has a hearing impairment as well. I'm a mother of a child who has identified as bi. So there's a lot of stuff in my world that really I should know better. And sometimes I just slip. And it's definitely not intended. And sometimes those things are intended, and that's not the case. But let's talk about microaggression and the way it affects us in so many different ways. Like I said, I consider myself to be pretty open-minded and accepting, but sometimes I'm kind of shocked at the biases, or maybe I didn't realize I have the bias, or maybe I didn't realize what I was saying gave off the impression of a bias or a prejudice, simply because of life experiences. If you're wondering what a bias is or prejudice is, oftentimes we're not born with them. I can tell you that right now. We are not born with them. But they often stem from experiences, environments, and the way we're taught. Think about things your parents said growing up. We probably all say stuff our mother said and go, oh my God, I just heard my mother coming out of my mouth. Whew. That's a weird one. But at the same time, those very same things create those biases, whether we're aware of them or not. We are created, prejudices are created for us by experiences our parents share with us, or experiences our parents prevent us from having, that we may not be able to get to experience until we're older and able to decide on our own. And then we can look back and go, holy shit, really? Wow. Okay. But remember, it is important to understand that any one of us, regardless of where we stand, any one of us can be guilty of making a microaggression or being on the receiving end of one. We all have biases, whether we realize it or not. And it's a beautiful opportunity when something happens that you get to deep dive and do some self-reflection and go, okay, this is what I get to change. And that's really what today's conversation is about, as we look through the things we say, the way we can change our language, and the way we can work through some of the things we say that we may not have realized have been hurtful or shameful. So why does it matter? Oh my gosh, it matters so much, especially right now. We have conversations happening on our Capitol Hills, especially here in Utah, about consent. We have stuff about our kids who are trans. We have or gay or identify with different pronouns. We have conversations about how we're treating people of color within our societies. We have conversations of how we're treating people with disabilities within this whole COVID treatment plan thing. Those are all biases, and they're coming from places that we're all just like, wait a minute, stop, hold on, let's examine this. We need to do better. So, but think of microaggressions as a small paper cut. We can handle one or two once in a while, and it's not going to make that big of a difference. But if you have someone who, in being themselves, is a revolutionary act because they are crushing stereotypes of who and what they should be, which is an absolutely amazing thing, and yay. When you're dealing with people who are constantly making those comments to you, that paper cut turns into 1,000 cuts a day, and it feels like a death by stabbing. It really does. I mean, we end up just as bloody as if we were stabbed. They keep coming. They accumulate over time. They crush our spirit. They crush who we are. They crush our desire and our will, and all because we're just trying to be who we are without definition. Microaggression can be an interesting concept, but my point in having this conversation today is that I hope to bring some awareness to the language we use and how it affects others. Microaggressions are very prevalent in our everyday lives. Here's some examples, and you might not even think about it. Some of you will. I have a lot of friends that are very aware of their language, and I have some that are just like, whatever. I am who I am, but they matter, and here's why. When's the last time you said, I am so OCD about my files, or wow, I'm feeling kind of dyslexic today because I just can't read straight? Or something that gets said to me quite often is, you must have selective hearing because you hear too well to be deaf. Or if you see someone or you yourself find yourself speaking loudly to a blind person, you yell as if they were deaf, and because there's this underlying thought that if they're disabled in one area, they're disabled in all areas of their life functions. Do you see the biases? Sometimes it's assumption, sometimes it's a preconceived notion that you don't know where it came from or why you did that, but it just kind of sits there and you work through that. So I'm going to put a disclaimer in here. I'm speaking from my experiences, one, as a woman, and two, as a person with a disability. As much as I hate saying I have a disability, because I really don't feel disabled, I just feel a little challenged. Technically, I'm disabled. I am protected under the Americans with Disability Act. And that's a big deal. And do you guys know that's only been around since 1990? All of these things that are happening with disabilities and the equality and all of these things have happened in my lifetime. And I'm only 50 some odd years old. That's my lifetime. So this is something that's still kind of new, and we're still working through all these processes, and we have these older generations that are stuck in their mindsets. That's a conversation for another day. Anyway, so again, I'm speaking from my experiences, but I will give some examples for people of color, people with disabilities, especially from my vantage point, and some things that my son has shared with me, both as an autistic child and as someone who identifies as bi. So for me, as I just mentioned, the comment that they made, you must have selective hearing because you hear too well. For my son, however, because he does have a intellectual disability, the autism, he hates the R word, and I'll say it gently because I hate this word too, is retarded. And sometimes you hear people say, that's so retarded. Oh my God, I hate that. I hate that for a variety of reasons because at one point, mental retardation was a medical diagnosis, but somehow it turned into a slang word that's not nice at all. And it really gets applied to things that are just horrifically mean. And sometimes people will say that thinking they're just saying, in their mind, they're thinking that's kind of twisted, that's kind of wrong, that's not very cool, that's something. But they use that R word and it creates a whole different conversation and a whole different feel to things. And so we have to be careful with the words we choose. For me, sometimes I'll hear people say, oh my gosh, she's so deaf and dumb. And they're using it as a way to say she's not listening and she's not using her head. Say that. You're not listening and you're not using your head, but oh my God, you're being deaf and dumb. That's insulting to me for a variety of reasons. And it should be insulting to you too, because I'm hoping you're not deaf. You can be if you get yelled at, because I don't like being yelled at. Again, you can't yell at the deaf girl. But, see what I'm saying? I've also experienced microaggressive behavior from men on my team. I've been in executive management for over 15 some odd years in my career. And I've had men on my team, and sometimes women, who have issues with self-esteem. You would be so surprised at how many men on my team try to talk over me, or try to mansplain me, or try to tell me I don't understand something when it comes to operations or maintenance or carpentry or mechanics or whatever. And I'll be sitting there going, but I just explained the process. And they'll start talking over me, or they'll try to explain it for me. Or they'll sit there and go, I'm so surprised you get that. You actually used the right terminology. That's a microaggression behavior, guys. It really is. And that's just not cool. Now, it's one thing to say, hey, I want to make sure you understand the process. Okay, I can handle that kind of comment. I'm not going to understand it if you say, I'm so surprised you get it. Doesn't work that way with me. Additionally, again, not speaking from experience as someone who knows, I will never, ever, ever understand the experience of a person of color. I can also say that, there are so many things that we say and do that are really just not supportive of them, even if we call ourselves an ally. But what I'm going to share with you right now are things that I've seen from my own vantage point, and also things I've seen when I've been out with my friends who are people of color. I've seen people literally cross streets when they see my friends. I have seen people grab their purses or cover their necklaces when they get on the elevator with them. I have seen people pull their kids closer. I've seen that with people with tattoos. I have a lot of biker friends too. I will tell you right now, most of my biker friends are way nicer than most of the guys that I know that go to church every Sunday. A lot less judgmental too. And they do a lot less microaggressive behavior. Do you see the things? You see the things. Some of the things I've observed have just been crazy, crazy, crazy. I've also been in a situation where I've been with my friends who are Asian or of Asian descent, and people have literally said, wow, you speak really good English. Why the hell do people assume that people that are Asian are not born here? Yes, we do have people that have immigrated over or are visiting or who are from Asian countries, But why do we automatically assume that they don't speak English? That is a microaggression. And that's a bias that can come from different things, that come from movies, that come from things that we've been exposed to growing up. And those things need to change. And oftentimes, too, this is the other part I really found interesting. And I knew this was happening, but I found it interesting as I was doing my research on this. Oftentimes, people within marginalized groups have their own biases too, and with good reason. Like within, for me, a lot of times when I walk into a completely hearing situation, knowing I'm probably one of the only one, or the only one who has a hearing impairment, my bias is they're not going to understand and they're not going to take the time to make the effort so that I can be heard or that I can hear them. And that's a bias, and that's a microaggression. I'm making comments sometimes, and clearly, my statement of "you can't yell at the deaf girl," that's kind of a microaggressive statement too. It really is if you think about it. And I've also experienced where I've been with other people who are 100% deaf or completely deaf or have very minimal hearing, who live in that culture, who have extreme biases against either people like myself who are wholly immersed in the hearing world or against hearing people, period. They have their own biases. And rightfully so, because oftentimes the hearing world has not been kind to the deaf world at all. And they say stuff like deaf and dumb, or they will make really rude comments, or they'll do the pretend sign language and stuff like that. That's all microaggressive behavior. And again, I've done some of it too, and I'm not saying I'm an expert or I'm perfect at this, because I'm not. And I'll probably continue to screw up. But what I'm trying to say right now is we have an opportunity to examine our behaviors and go, wait a minute, that wasn't kind. Hey, moving on. Another statement I've had from me is, it must be so nice for you because you get a free ride into college, or you get an automatic admission because of your hearing, because they have certain quotas they have to meet to make sure they have disabled students on campus. Or I've heard people say to my friend, "Wow, I wish I had your privileges in getting in college because of the color of my skin." How's that for microaggression? Another thing people do, when they talk about, I'm so OCD that I have to keep my files a certain way, or I'm not reading well today, I must be dyslexic. That's ableist language, y'all. That completely trivializes or makes light of a serious health condition, a serious mental illness, or a disability, or even an ethnicity. That's not cool. And so, additionally, in speaking to a friend of mine who has firsthand knowledge of the behavior, another microaggression, which I truly believe is unintended. It can be a little defensive at times, but I truly believe is unintended because people really truly are trying to say, hey, I'm an ally. But at the same time, what they're not realizing is the way they're saying it kind of denying people of their individuality. One of the phrases that my friend, who is a person of color, hates is, I'm colorblind, or I don't see color. I was always taught or raised to, respect everyone no matter what. That's actually a minor or unintended form of microaggression. And if I get blasted for that, please know that I'm saying this because I'm trying to educate people based on disabilities and a whole other level of things. So please understand that this is not being said from a place of sarcasm. It really isn't. My friend has shared with me that when people say that to him, he feels a little ignored, or that he's being denied his individuality as a person of color or as a cultural being. And that made me stop and think for a minute. Basically, he explained this. He goes, see my color, see my differences. Just don't marginalize me and put me into a different group because of them. I'm still who I am. My skin may be different, but I am still who I am, and I have so much to offer you. Don't single me out because of that. Acknowledge it. Celebrate it. celebrate my heritage, just like what we do with St. Patrick's Day or Irishes or Spanish or whatever. We celebrate all of that, but oftentimes we get angry when we have to celebrate something else when it comes to a person of color. Because at the end of the day, my skin color doesn't matter. How I treat you as a person, how I respect you as a human, is the only thing that matters. The rest of the shit doesn't matter. So why do we make it a big deal? And why do we make the stupid ass comments that we make? Because they're not kind. They're not kind. And oh my gosh, you guys, that conversation spoke volumes to me. Again, I will never ever understand firsthand what a person of color deals with. I will probably never, and I will never understand what a person who is trans or gay or queer, or any of that. I will not understand that, but I will understand it as a mother. I will understand watching my child and what he has to deal with, the comments that get made to him because of his mental illness, with his autism, and because of his orientation. It is absolutely maddening, and I don't know how to protect him sometimes, and I do. Don't get me wrong, I do. So again, as someone who is a white woman, although I have a disability, I will never understand what a person of color is dealing with. Just like a person of color will never understand what I'm dealing with as a person with a disability. We both have experiences that we can share with each other and show each other how we can all just get along and be kinder, gentler people. Do you see what I mean? These biases and these microaggressions do nothing to be inclusive. They do nothing for us as a society. They do nothing for us in coming together as a community. So how do we work through handling microaggressions? It can be difficult and it can be tricky, but it can be done. Oftentimes people who... Okay, let me start over. Oftentimes people accuse you of being sensitive or overly emotional or whatever when you point out a microaggression or point out an offensive statement. That can make it difficult to want to approach someone. We seriously do make these statements sometimes, and we really don't intend them to be harmful, but we really do need to stop and think and listen to what we're saying and how we're saying it, because it matters. If you're on the receiving end of a microaggressive behavior, before you react, consider the context. Consider the context. If the person making the statement is someone who you could give a rat's ass less about maintaining a relationship with, respond however you see fit. Let them know how you feel. Make sure you're safe in doing so. Don't put yourself in a situation where you're going to get hurt or blasted or ganged up on or whatever. But make sure that you know that you have the ability to say what you need to say, and you don't like what they said, and you can stick up for yourself. And then move on. Don't stay stuck in that space. Move on. That's their issue, not yours. It really is not. But if the microaggressor is someone that you really truly don't want to burn bridges with, it's maybe a spouse, it could be a partner, it could be a coworker, a boss, it could even be your child, it could be a best friend. Maybe just say, hey, you know what? I am so uncomfortable with what you just said. I need a minute. Let me step away. Can we talk tomorrow? Can I round back out with you for an hour? Let's talk about this. I just want to touch base on that statement you just made, and I want to make sure that I'm good with where I'm at. Keep the initial conversation short, and then schedule time to talk about it later, and then give the other person something to think about. Let them know why you want to do this. Let them know that you are just not okay with what was just said. And sometimes the confrontation can be so nerve-wracking because you're not sure how they're going to react. They can be angry, they can be defensive, they can be all sorts of things. The best thing I can suggest to you is that you take the emotion out of it. Don't accuse the microaggressor of being something. Attack the comment, not the person. Take the emotion out of it, and then talk to them about how the statement or the behavior made you feel. And then give them solutions. Hey, this is why this is so offensive. This is why this hurt my feelings. Give them some background. For me, when people say to me, you know, you speak too well to be deaf, or are you sure that's not just selective hearing? I'll look at them and say, can you talk to me about what you meant by that? Are you joking? Are you joking, or are you really meaning that in a way that I think you might be meaning that? Meaning, I know that I do rather well in the hearing world. I have figured out my tricks. I have figured out how to adapt. And I really do know and realize that some people look at me and go, she's not that deaf. I really am that deaf. I just know how to adapt. Talk to me about that. Instead of saying, you have selective hearing, say, hey, I've noticed you do really well in a situation. Talk to me about that. Tell me what's going on, because I'm curious about that, because my impression of deaf people is that they shouldn't be doing this well in any kind of situation. I would rather have somebody say something like that to me than, wow, what do deaf people look like? Are you sure you can do that because you're deaf? Seriously. Come on. We don't do that. That's like telling a blind man they can't cross the street, and we know damn well they can. And of course, you can always choose not to respond. Sometimes you don't want to confront antagonistic people who might become angry, supervisors who might retaliate against you. But if you really feel that the subject needs to be addressed, talk to someone who is a neutral party and have them be there. If you're worried about repercussions, get HR involved, get a third party involved, get a neutral party involved, and have them sit there and be kind of like a mediator and to document it and to witness it. I'm going to say this very clearly, though. No matter who you are, if you are on the receiving end of microaggressive behavior, you do not have to stay silent ever. Ever. It is your choice how you address it, not theirs. Yours. Always. If you feel the need to speak up, then do so. If you feel offended, then say so. If you want to change culture, the only way that's going to happen is if you start speaking up and saying why this is wrong. It is really just as simple as that. My biggest suggestion is that you keep the emotion out of it, keep it factual, and keep it relevant, and make sure you're very, very clear about why the statement and the behavior bothered or offended you. Now, if you're observing the microaggressive behavior, if you're there standing there listening to a conversation, or you're in a meeting, or you see something happening, be an ally. Be an ally, but don't speak for that person. Don't ever step yourself in a place and say, well, I'm going to sit there and tell you that person doesn't like that. One of my biggest pet peeves is when people stand in front of me and step in front of me and go, oh, well, she can't hear you very well, so I'll just take the conversation from here and then I'll handle her later. Oh, hell no. Don't do that. Ever. Ever. Don't speak for me. Speak with me. And say, I don't appreciate the way you're speaking to her. Why don't you step back and give her an opportunity to understand what's going on? Give her an opportunity to respond. Help her understand you. You're speaking too fast. You have a heavy accent. It's really noisy in here. Can we step outside? There's so many ways you can speak for them. But do not step in front of me. Don't ever do that. And don't do that to anyone, actually, unless you're asked to. If you're specifically requested, hey, can you step in for me? Then do that. But don't speak for them. Don't do that. You can always say to someone, hey, I don't like how you just spoke to her. I don't like how you just spoke to him. What you just said was really offensive, dude. That's really not cool anymore. That statement is so outdated. You need to check yourself. So here's why this is upsetting to me. And so we're going to educate you, type of thing. But again, keep the emotion out of it. So here's the fun part. So what happens if you're being the one that's the microaggressor and you're being called out? It happens. It's happened to me several times. I made a statement recently and I got called out on it pretty hard. But you know what? I kind of stepped back and went, I thought I was being funny, but I can see why I wasn't. Smart-ass remarks and sarcasm can be microaggressive and they can be offensive. So check yourself a little bit. I've had to. We all need to. I think I seriously think back on conversations and cringe sometimes and think, what the hell was I saying that for? And I am so grateful that those people are still talking to me. Seriously. And I'm grateful that they spoke up too. Even the best of intentions can commit microaggression. That doesn't mean you're a bad person. It just means that you've got some deep diving to do to understand your own biases and prejudices and maybe educate yourself a little bit about where they came from. Maybe it's a statement you heard growing up from your grandparents or your parents, and you just started saying it because you always heard your parents respond to a situation with that kind of a comment. And so it just became something that was a natural part of your language. It happened. That's what language is. You learn what's going on in society and you do that. But educate yourself and understand why it was perceived as offensive or hurtful. The best thing you can do when you're being confronted by someone who states that you've made an ill-timed or ill-informed or ill-placed statement is don't get defensive. Oftentimes, that's our first reaction. We're going to get defensive. Well, I didn't mean that. I didn't mean that. You know what? Shush, 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 shush. Step back. Listen. Acknowledge that the person and confronting you and that is confronting you. I'm so sorry. Acknowledge that the person that is confronting you is taking a huge risk in sharing this information because they're not sure how you're going to react. It's scary to let people know that something they've said has hurt you, especially when you know that on the whole, that's really truly not who they are. And if you know them, you might realize that might come from their background, where they grew up, and all these things, and it's just one of those things. And they sometimes don't realize they're saying it, so it's a great opportunity to educate each other. The other step you take is if you're being called out on being that person, is you apologize and you reflect on where that microaggression is coming from. But acknowledge the person, apologize to them, and say, you know what? I'm not sure where that came from. Do you mind talking this through with me? If they're open to that, they might not be. They might just be pissed off and say, no, you figure it out on your own. Just don't ever say that to me again. But sometimes, really, truly, like I just said, it's from your childhood, it's from learning experiences, it's from experiences you've had that have set the tone for your experiences with other people in similar situations. And you've just heard it over and over and over again. And you realize you hear stuff on TV, you hear stuff in the movies, and it just keeps happening. And there's so much microaggression in movies and television, even in Disney and some of the stuff that they do. But it's a great responsibility, a great opportunity to take responsibility for you increasing your own understanding of your own privileges and prejudices or lack of. So, whatever you do, don't fool yourself into thinking that you're not doing harm to other people if you're being called out. You may think you're not, but you probably are, which is why something's being said. So, be open, learn, and be conscious of your language, especially your biases, and then understand where your biases are coming from. And when you're speaking, pause before you know you're going to make a comment. Be conscious in your thinking. Think about the impact of what you're going to say, and if it's necessary. There are times that you're out with a group of close friends and you can be sarcastic and you say some stupid shit and you can get away with it. And, sometimes that's okay. Sometimes it's not. It might just be a group thing. But be careful what you do with that because you might have somebody in that group that is not used to that and they're so offensive. There is so much slang in American English. The majority of American English is slang, and we don't realize what we're saying sometimes because of American English. So think about what you're saying and why, and when you make a conscious effort to think about what you're saying, you're showing a level of respect for others and for yourself that's really quite impressive. So really what this boils down to is that you're making an effort to always be kind and then you're treating people with respect and you're also treating people the way you want to be treated. It goes a long, long, long way in the world of inclusion, and we are working so hard to be inclusive and diverse, and what we say matters. You cannot create a culture change if you don't change the way you speak. You can write all the policies you want, you can write all the laws you want, but if you don't start mirroring and setting the example in that behavior and watching what you're saying through movies, through all of those things, through the social settings, everything, it's not going to happen very fast. We have to be the ones that do it. We're the ones that are in there in everybody's face every day, with or without a mask on, and the Zoom meetings and everything like that. In order for us to create a culture change, we have to be the ones making the change ourselves through the way we speak to each other. And that being mindful in our language. So hopefully, that little snippet on Microaggression gives you something to think about in your day-to-day language behaviors. How you speak to people with disabilities, how you speak to people that are of color, how you speak to older people, how you speak to women, and even how you speak to men, because women do it to men too. I mean, we get so irritated with the way we're treated, we turn around and make some of the same damn ass comment back. That doesn't make it right. But we can't stand up for ourselves in a different way. All of us can. So let's be mindful. Let's be kind. Let's just be there always. So don't forget to hit the subscribe button and hit the like button or throw me a comment. Be nice. Be nice. Anyways, have a great day. Enjoy your Thursday evening, and I'll see you next week.